I like how every time I feel like I have to remind people that there are gonna be fuck words in this, because like I can just see somebody like watching it with their family, and then I'm just like, you know, talking about Marcus's badonkadonk and swearing up a storm. So there always has to be the disclaimer. Oh God, you're gonna love the ones I picked then. I mean, you've probably seen them before, but I honestly looked for dumbest expressions for the two of them. I had to. How could I not? Man. They're giant, giant idiots. I'll give people, I know some other people had responded. I'll give people a little bit more time to funnel in here too. You know, I was gonna say maybe very, very dumb. Hold on. I will drop a curious teaser into the chat for everyone. Hold on. Let me get to my phone. Curious teaser. Come on. Curious teaser. Here you go. All right, this cat. That's the cat. Potato's here. Potato came to say hi. Potato, we're talking about how you don't have a brain cell. Hi. Hi. How you have no brain cells. Your brain cells are empty. Yes. Cross-eyed mom. We love her for it. Her head is empty. Oh, Potato. Potato wants pets. I am petting him right now. Potato's. Hi, sweetie. What do you think? What do you think? Ooh. What do you think? Hi. You want to come up? You want to come up? You want to come up and meow into the microphone? You want to come up? Yeah. When it hits in the corner, Potato takes a screenshot. Hey, baby. Hey, baby. I don't know how long you guys think we should wait. Oh, good. Toast is here. All right. Yeah, I know. Taters, where you going? Taters. He's gonna be really upset. We got the carpets in my sunroom and TV room steamed today, and so they're like damp, and the cats are gonna try to go on them to like get to their food, and they're gonna have wet paws. There's gonna be a lot of upset. Oh, I like the pipe one, yeah. Alrighty. I guess we could start in a bit and people can just come in late if they want. Yeah, the Doom one, the maze. Yeah. I'm sure you could still get those, but like, people don't use screensavers anymore. Your monitor just turns off. It's no fun. All right. Are we ready to start this bad boy? Ready to go? Ready to have fun? I know there were a couple more people who had said, let me check the event. Oh, okay. That is okay. Most of us are here. There are a couple others that they can kind of jump in when they can jump in. That's cool. All right. Potato. He's screaming. Potato. Come here. Well, come here. Come here then. I'm going to put the mic down and see if he'll talk into it. Be right back. Come here. Potato. Potato. World's tiniest meow. Did you hear that? Potato. 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 No, that was okay. It was meow. That's what he sounds like. That's literally, I'm imitating exactly what he sounds like. He goes meow. That's it. All right. We're going to start. Hopefully you can all stay with me and get to see my cats at the end. This is our workshop on how to help fanworks, yours and other people's fanworks, get better, right? Oh, come on. Don't do this to me. So just because the order is, yes, big kitty, tiny, eat up, 22-pound cat, and he meows like that. Tell me I'm insane. So the only reason I'm bothering with an agenda is because we're actually going backwards today. You would think that you would start with like writing your work and then editing your own work and then looking for a beta and then working with your beta and then maybe at the end how to become a beta, all right? But I've set this up in the absolute reverse order, all right? We are going backwards, and that's because there's this, concept that getting or being a beta reader is some big deal. It's an intimidating thing or whatever. And so I wanted to start out with like, what is a beta and how you can be a beta, because I want to describe the beta job first. And then we're kind of going to work backwards until at the end, we're going to, go over a couple ways you can take your work to the next level, right? So if you're like, Sev, why didn't you start with actually making and writing and editing your own fic? That's why. It just kind of worked better this way, right? Note this presentation focuses mainly on writers and their fic. Artists, we know that you're out there, we value you, but artists usually don't use betas. So there are artist workshops that are probably going to be more useful to artists that we're trying to develop. All that being said, like, even if you don't write, you could maybe be an awesome beta and you just haven't realized it. Okay, because betas don't really my type wasn't realizing it's supposed to be English. Yeah, well. Anyway, artists can make great betas if you know the fandom, if you know what you like to read. You don't have to be a writer to be able to beta somebody's fic, and I'm going to prove it to you in this presentation. So what is baiting? What is editing? We're going to kind of walk through like some basic definitions first, and then we're going to go on. You'll see, like, I had a late night where I wasn't sleeping, and I added a whole bunch of like fucking memes and pictures into this thing. So you'd be a great beta to host. Hi. Oh, Mr. Taters. Mr. Taters is here. So, all right, this is kind of the basic editing process. Okay, the first step is conception, and that's basically where you have and develop your idea. You come up with some kind of idea of what you want to write. It might be a one shot. It might be 50,000 word mega epic thing, but you are generating the idea, right? Haven't developed the idea, not a baby, unless you want a baby. All right. Drafting. All right. That's when we actually write the bitch. All right. You get your ass in your seat, your hands on the keys, and you get those words into the document. Right. So, it's funny. Okay. Side note, I interviewed a bunch of my friends from other fandoms for this presentation to make sure that I was covering like what makes a good beta in all different kinds of fandoms. And like, I know a lot of people who beta who just do it really casually, like, and they'll just like dump their comments into the document in bold, like right in line, or like in a different font color or something like that. Anyway, all right, so first you have the idea, and then you write the idea, right? And then you edit your own idea, all right? Rewrite any parts you're unhappy with, look at the flow, etc. Proofread. You'll see me using SPAG a lot. If anybody doesn't know what that is, SPAG is spelling and grammar. So late night me wrote eat spaghetti with your spag. All right, I'm not talking about spaghetti. It's spelling and grammar. Just a general random bitch. Yeah, I know, right? So if you were going to have a beta, that's where that person would come in, all right, is after you've edited your own work, you get a review from a second pair of eyes, right? And then obviously we all post it, and then you sit there refreshing your inbox, 18,000 times an hour until you get that first comment or kudos or whatever, right? We all do that. And again, the betas are optional, but if you are going to have a process that includes a beta, this is kind of how you're going to do it, right? So what does a beta reader do? Now, the term beta comes from the software industry. All right, beta testers basically use products that have been mostly completed but are unreleased, and they basically bang on them from every single direction and test how they work and try to break them, hoping that they can identify problems before the product is released to the client. And that's kind of where the term comes from. A beta reader looks at your work, again, when it's close to finished, right? Reviewing for spag errors and typos. And sometimes, you know, if you typo a word and it's misspelled, most software catches that these days, but with autocorrect becoming so annoying, you can like end up with the wrong there if you typed it funny and Word corrects you wrong. All right. So, oh, you have no idea. You have no, the Megaverse was everywhere. I was like, no, not beta cuck, beta reader, beta tester. But these are the things that a beta reader kind of looks at. And we're going to go over a little bit later how, you know, in depth should a beta read be? And the answer is as in depth as you and the beta want, right? So, you know, there's a whole bunch of terms that are going to get thrown around here. So let's talk about the difference between some of these terms, all right? The first are your general, like, editor people, all right? The term editing I'm using here to be changes that you make to your own work, all right? Catching your own mistakes. A proofreader is somebody who's really just focusing on nailing your spelling, your grammar. Are your commas in the right place? Is your formatting okay? Is it going to post? That kind of thing. A beta reader is a proofreader plus, all right? So that's like your second pair of eyes who looks at the work from a higher level, okay? Looks more at the big picture of the work to make recommendations for improvements, as well as doing that nitpicky proofreading. An alpha reader actually is a term I haven't heard recently, but back in the early days of Fanon, the alpha reader was somebody who was the Omega. Oh my God, it is Omegaverse again. I should have added Omega reader. I will actually do that before I share the slides because it's funny. Yeah, alpha reader. So like now it's kind of just like that fandom friend who you have an idea and you jump into their DMs and you scream at them. But like it used to be an alpha reader used to be a thing. So, and this is somebody like as you come up with your idea, they kind of brainstorm back and forth with you. When you get stuck, they help you fill those scenes. It's basically what I use Atro for. But, you know, then there are cheerleaders, right? And that's a person whose job is kind of basically to keep you motivated when you're writing and be really excited about your work. A cheerleader isn't doing critique. So that's kind of how they differ from the rest of them. All right. Then we have a set of what I'm going to call like specialty readers. Okay. Specialty edits or reads that you can get. All right. A canon check is you find somebody who is deeply familiar with your source canon. In this case, it would be somebody who has, you know, 100% of the game, gotten every ending, played it multiple times, right? And they'll take your work and they'll kind of say, review it specifically against, oh, that was Potato. That was him. Did you hear him? Hi, baby. That tiny squeak, that was a potato. Yeah. Uh-huh. Hey, do you have something else to say? Did you hear that one? Hi. Yes. That's his scream. That's his scream. He's terrible. So, oh, come on. Anyway, so yeah, you can get a canon check. You can get a regionalization or culture check, right? And normally that's like somebody American writing a British fandom or somebody British writing American fandom. But you can also use it like, you know, this whole presentation is about writing in English, right? But let's say I had a fic set in Paris. If I knew somebody who lived in Paris, I might say, I'm not going to, you know, use French terms in my English fic, but like what kind of flavor could I add to make this feel a lot more like Paris, you know? Help me out. Sensitivity reader, this is one that's kind of new in the last decade or so. And that's, you know, somebody who is from or very aware of a specific culture who's going to look at what you wrote and make sure that you aren't like accidentally stereotyping or inadvertently writing something that might make somebody uncomfortable. Now I want to be very clear that like, if you're a straight person and you want to write a story about two gay men, that's fine. When you would use a sensitivity reader is like if you are a straight person and you're writing a story about two gay men and the gay experience is a significant part of your characterization or your plot or what you're exploring, then, you know, it's kind of considered tactful to have a queer person read it over and be like, you know, you're good, or like, hey, we don't use this term anymore, you know, or like, you maybe want to look at this one. It's actually a TERF red flag or something like that. Then there's a subject matter expert, all right? And that's, somebody who is a subject matter expert who will look at your subject matter and let you know if you nailed it or not. For example, if you're writing a hurt comfort fic where somebody gets really injured, you might want to run it past a nurse and be like, hey, what would actually happen here? Or like you're writing a scene where a character is doing a lot of programming. You might want to, if you have a programmer friend, say, hey, can you see, like, is this believable or not? All right. Oh my God, come on. So obviously there's overlap. I'm not saying you have to have 9 different people read your fucking fic for it to be good. All right. Obviously you don't need to do every one of these, and people can do more than one job, but like these are kind of the different terms that get thrown around fandom. And so if you are looking for one of these things, you know what term to use to try to find one. It's like, why bother using a beta reader, right? I'm not going to, read every word of this, right? But they're a second pair of eyes. All right. When you are so used to your own writing, that person is going to catch things that you didn't catch. They're going to approach the work as a reader and not a creator. Okay. And that's different. You're the one who made it. And so you are already invested in it. They're going to come to it in the terms of, I just found this fic on AO3. What do I think about it? Right. Yes, please do. Please do. I mean, David Cage is the obvious sensitivity reader, right? Second opinion on things like characterization and interpretation of canon events. And actually, we're going to talk about Canon and Fanon and Headcanon later. And I'm expecting some of you are going to want to fight me. But I've got some examples and some games to play with that one. It's also like, you may not see that plot hole because you explained it to yourself in your head. You figured out what went wrong, but maybe you forgot to write an important point. Yes, exactly, Atro. Like, you forgot to write a certain point, or you didn't make it clear enough. In your head, it all makes sense, but your beta's going to take one look at it and be like, yo, Sev, what the fuck? All right? A good beta isn't just going to take your story apart. They usually comment on what's good about the fic as well. And getting any kind of feedback, even if you don't take your beta's recommendations, it's going to make you a better writer over time. Maybe in the next fic, you're going to think about it and be like, hey, well, that didn't work for that other fic, but maybe it would work for this one, right? It's funny. No beta, we die like Counter Detroit, right? So obviously, you don't have to use a beta if you don't want to, all right? I do want to point out that there are many fandom events, especially Big Bang events, where the fics are longer, that they require writers to use a beta. At the moment, we do not, but it is very common in fandom. If you join other Bang events in fandom, there are a lot of times that you're going to have to be able to find a beta. All right. Fandom's for fun, and despite what you might have heard online, we're actually not the fandom police. However, kind of like the commenting workshop, I'm assuming that if you're here, it's because you're interested in beta stuff. So we're going to talk about beta stuff in this particular one. All right. Yeah. Go back. So I included these, like I said, I was interviewing some of my friends about like, why bother using a beta reader? And they actually, 2 of them use me as an example. But I want to point out, upper right, both Feathers and I had like a friend who did a brutal beta on our work, tore it apart, and it literally changed the way that we write. Okay. Like, my friend, I thought, was just going to do a quick beta, and I got back like nitpicks down to like the sentence, and not even like you used the wrong word. It was like, this word is okay, but this word would have more impact. All right. It was the hardest criticism I've ever gotten on a fic, but it literally 20 years later, it has changed the way I write. I still hear her voice in my head when I am writing and thinking about sentence structure. All right. And I also want to point out Egg Game, because Egg Game is a fun way to keep your beta interested if you're betaing an extra long fic. I once dared Feathers. I said, if you include, I am such a close reader, I will, if you put the word egg into your fic somewhere, I guarantee I'll find it. And he's like, this is 60,000 words. Are you serious? And I was like, yes, I will find the word egg. Okay. And he snuck it in because instead of just putting the word egg in the middle of a sentence where it didn't make sense, he would have somebody talk about eggs or like eating eggs. So I was like, is this egg or is this a trap? Is this like legitimate egg or fake egg? So, and that's kind of, it made me read even closer because I was trying to catch all the eggs without like a fake egg. So if you want your friends with somebody and you're really into the swing of baiting, you can try the egg game. It's a good time. So how to become a beta reader. And this is the point. All right, who can be a beta reader? You. Anybody on this call can be a beta reader. I guarantee it. Except maybe Toast. No, I'm joking. Anybody here can be a beta reader, right? Even if you don't write, you know what? Do you read fanfic? Are you a nerd about your canon? You think about your canon? Then you're qualified, okay? If you've never done it before, everybody betaed for a first time, all right? If you're not good at it, I mean, just be upfront with the author. Like, your job's not to be perfect. It's to be that second pair of eyes that gives feedback, all right? Even if you think you're bad at grammar, like, there's a lot of people who are good at grammar, and grammar is the easiest part of writing because there's 8 million resources out on the internet. All right, so like, that's fine. Even if English isn't your first language, you know what? You might catch something that I wrote, an idiom that I included that doesn't make sense if you don't live in Ohio. All right, and you know, if I want my fic to appeal to people outside of the state of Ohio, maybe I want to rephrase that. It's like, actually, it's kind of good sometimes to have somebody who speaks English as a second language read through and be like, yo, Sev, this phrase makes no sense, right? Yes, exactly. So basic beta reader skills, and again, I'm not going to like read this whole slide to you, but you know, understanding grammar and then understanding the difference between accidentally getting the grammar wrong or breaking a rule for effect, and that's something we're also going to talk about a little bit later in the presentation. Good dialogue practices. I have a bunch of examples to help you guys snazz up your dialogue because people struggle with dialogue. And so when we get to the editing your own work part, and it also applies for a beta, you're going to get learned. Know the true form of expressions. This one came from Atro, all right? It is all intents and purposes. So, you know, make sure that you... intents of purposes could exist. And everybody now, if you can actually work the phrase for all intents of purposes into your fanfic, you will get a role. A special role this year. The role will be Atro's going to ban me. The difference between a good description and what they call purple prose, which is that really heavy, flowery, very descriptive, very big word, and it fits some settings, okay? And, you know, it can really work in some settings and some fics and some AUs, but don't let it go far enough to be cerulean orbs, okay? They're not orbs. They're fucking eyes. Oh, Atro, there's a slide on that. Don't worry. I already have that. And then the difference between personal preference and actual rules, okay? Like the Oxford comma, some academic styles use it, some don't, okay? But it's not a rule for something like fanfic, okay? It's a personal preference, all right? We're talking about dashes. I have a specific way that I use my dashes in my fanfic, and so anytime I'm having a beta, I just say, don't touch my dashes, all right? I have them a specific way that I like. It does not match any academic style, but it is how I want my work to be presented on the internet visibly. So I'm just like, don't touch my dashes, you know? Oh, I will die with my Oxford comma in my hands, trust me, all right? But other big things, you know, a basic beta reader can be asked to look at, all right? The overall flow of the plot. When you're, you know, first of all, are there holes, all right? Do you trip over anything that I forgot to put in my fic, all right? Is there a scene when you're reading and you're just like hoping the author would hurry up and get with it, all right? That's a flow problem. That's dragging. Do you get to a point in the fic where you're like scrolling back to back read to figure out like, what the fuck, how did we get here? All right, that's also a flow problem. So if you notice these things when oh, teen, I would have killed somebody. You do not know. No. But yeah, so like those are, if you read fanfic and you have had any of those moments, then you could beta somebody's work for flow, right? And it's not just about the plot, it's about the writing, okay? Is there info dumping? You know, that you're like scrolling through 3 paragraphs that are just kind of telling you stuff. We're going to go over what telling versus showing actually means, because people get confused with that. And one of my worst crimes is using the same word 4 times. I find a word that I think perfectly fits my scene, and then I realize that I've used it like 4 times within 3 sentences, which, you know, is not great. There's your, you know, canon check. That's the thing. And then continuity. All right. Like, does the fic follow its own rules? All right. If you say in chapter 1 that like Connor can't do blank, and then in chapter 6 Connor's suddenly doing blank, like, you know, oh no, when the word is cock or the word is said or the word is someone's name, that doesn't count. But like, I absolutely, if it's like some descriptor and I'm like, yes, Marcus is anxious, I'm like, anxious, blah blah blah, anxious, like, yeah. So if any of these feel like things you can do, then yes, you can be a beta. But how do you do it? All right. And the short answer is however you want. But if I put this together for somebody who's maybe never been a beta before, okay? Your first pass, you only get one first time to read a story. And so you should look at the story, all right? How does it flow? How does it feel? Are the characterizations on? You know, does it feel like canon? That kind of thing. So do it as a big picture. Then you do a second pass where you get nitpicky and you look for those awkward phrases or extra commas or, you know, this word is just clumsy to me. And, you know, you kind of want to be specific and feel free to make recommendations, right? If you're telling me that this word feels clumsy, do you know a word that would feel better? You know? And then you wrap up what you thought about the work, right? Let them know, always let them know what you really enjoyed about the work. If there is a problem you want to discuss, explain it with kindness and consideration, all right? And remember that when you're done with the fic, you're not entirely done, because if the writer has questions about, yep. But, you know, if the writer has questions about your beta, you do want to be available even after you've written up so you can kind of talk through that method. So if you've never baited before and you're wondering kind of how to do it, yeah, this is just a place to start. But how do you actually do it? All right. There are two main ways that I see most people baiting right now, and that's using comments and track changes or suggesting mode in Google Docs. All right. Leaving a comment, you highlight some text, and then you right click and it says leave comment, and you can leave a comment on that. And then when the writer goes back in, they click on the highlighted thing and it will show you which comment relates to that. All right. So you're leaving. I did that on purpose. Enjoy my man pipe. My parents are in the other room. Track changes. So here's the thing. Like if you've never baited for somebody before or you're new to it or whatever, track changes might feel awkward because you're actually going in and editing somebody's work. However, if it's a beta that I trust, let me tell you, I don't mind them doing track changes because then I can just click accept change. All right. And they've corrected my typo. They've added the comma that I missed. They've deleted the commas that shouldn't have been there. They've already done the work, and I just click accept or reject. All right. It may not be something that you want to do with somebody you're baiting for the first time because it can feel kind of intrusive to just dive right into their language. And some people don't like it at all. Yeah, well, it's my parents. I've written porn in front of them. So, but, you know, so these are the two methods, and usually people use a mix of both. All right. Like I'll use track changes to correct like typos and punctuation that I know is wrong and like grammar, you know, but if I'm making a suggestion or I'm saying this sentence is weird, I will usually put a comment and let that, oh, well, yeah. Yes, I was saying track changes you do not have to accept. You can just reject it. If you don't like what they did, if you really want to say massive man pipe, then you can say massive man pipe, all right? You know, you just reject that change. But again, like KTU was saying, and I was saying earlier, like some people, you can also just make a copy of their document and just put your thoughts right in there, all right? And then you send back their copy, they pull up your copy with your comments right next to their final copy, and they make what changes they need to. So it's not really that hard, and there are the massive man pipe roll. Wait, did you mean? Come on. Does that count? So I put together a couple do's and don'ts. And again, I'm not going to read this word for word, but you know, basically remember that you are making suggestions. All right. You're here to be helpful. You're here to make it extra awesome. Not all your suggestions are going to be accepted, and that's all right. The author is the one driving. Make sure you know what the author is most concerned about. Absolutely comment on the stuff that you do like. Explain your criticisms, and, you know, respect the overall vision of the work. Things maybe not to do, like focus only on what's wrong with the fic, and or insist that your own personal headcanons are the only correct way to write someone, and the writer's headcanons are also wrong. And again, this is why we're getting into canon and headcanons later. Spicy level, something we're also going to talk about, but going too far outside what you've your agreed comfort zone, right? Things not to do, maybe don't, if the writer has sunk 50,000 words into a fic, don't pick apart the core concept and be like, you know, I'm just not buying your original premise. I don't think they'd kiss, right? Don't try to shape the story into what you think a writer should be doing or what you want to see rather than what they actually want to write. All right, this isn't your story and it's not a commission. You know, if you want the writer to write you a particular story, give them some money on the side and don't tell AO3. You know, that's how you get that specific fic, right? So quick advice from experienced betas. And again, I asked some of my friends, and these are people who are my age. Actually, some of them are older. Yes, people older than me exist. Scary, isn't it? And I said, if you were going to give one piece of advice, to a new beta, what would what would it be? And I'm not going to read them to you, but I want you to quote that every single one of them, it wasn't about any of the technical parts of being a beta, all right? It's about being kind and positive, all right? It's about supporting your writer and helping to make their fic experience better. It's about the whole fic experience, so making the end product better, but like also making them enjoy the editing process. Because let me tell you, as a writer, I hate editing. And I just thought it was interesting that every single thing that they said had nothing to do with the technical part, like make sure that your grammar's good. Like, none of it did. All of it was about being a positive supporter, right? Get start writing, damn it. So here's the part where I'm going to make somebody on this phone call mad, all right? But how to beta around Canon, Fanon, and Headcanons, all right? And the reason this comes up is because when I was talking to people about baiting, one of the challenges, when I said what is hard about being a beta, it was kind of understanding interpretations of canon. Where's the line between this is my interpretation and I can write what I want, and yes, that's true, but this is really out of character, right? So we're going to go through some of these. Basic definitions. Canon is literally what happens in the source material. So like, this gets complicated in a game like Detroit Become Human, where there are a lot of different paths, okay? And so we're going to kind of talk about how those paths can change what people are looking at as canon or not, all right? But canon is what happens in that source material. There's no assumptions. There's no interpretation. There's no, like, I think this means blank, right? Fanon is an interesting thing, okay? It's something widely accepted but unofficial, all right? And it's reasonable assumption made based on the canon facts that most of the fandom thinks is a good interpretation, all right? But it's one step away from actual canon. It did not happen in the game. Headcanon is like an individual's personal take or personal interpretation. And now you can have different headcanons in different fics even, okay? You know, I could write one fic where I think, Marcus would do X, and I write another fic where I want to explore what would happen if Marcus did Y, right? And again, these are usually supported by canon, but they're usually like 2, 3, sometimes 7 steps away from canon, all right? And this is not moral judgment on what you want to write in terms of fanon, okay? Because that's the transformative parts of fandom. If all we wrote was canon, we'd be rewriting canon, okay? It would just be rewriting the game, right? So like, it's not, the point is to have fanon and headcanon, okay? But I want to talk about how limited canon can actually be. And so I've put together this example, all right? What is Canon? Connor is an RK800 prototype android sent by CyberLife, all right? So he literally says RK800 on his jacket, and he says he's the android sent by CyberLife. So how do we show that he's a prototype, all right? Well, Amanda calls him a prototype, and then Connor repeats that to Gavin that he is a prototype, right? Now, Amanda could be considered an unreliable narrator. We don't know if she exists in real life or just in Connor's head, okay? So I want to point out that there are the news announces that there is a prototype android working with a DPD, and Fowler uses the phrase prototype to refer to Connor, okay? So since it's being said independently from Amanda, it's confirmed that Connor is a prototype. All right, we can use that word in canon to refer to Connor. And I want to point out that's how far I'm going with canon, all right? 3 separate sources. I'm not saying you have to do that, but like, you want to be anal about canon, you can, all right? So here's the interesting part about Fanon. The first part, RK900 exists. So much of fandom, he's some people's favorite character, and his existence is actually not canon, okay? He is only shown in one optional ending scene, and the interesting part is, to get to that ending scene, you have to have Connor still be a machine, you have to have the revolution fail with Marcus or North dead, you have to have CyberLife win, all right? So if you are writing a deviant Connor in your fic, if your Connor deviated, RK900 does not exist in that canon universe, all right? Now, it's still reasonable for people to assume that Amanda was telling the truth and RK900 exists, or at least the concept of him. Maybe the State Department order exists, or maybe 200,000 of him exist, right? So it's like not unreasonable to assume that, but RK900 is not actually a canon character. He is fandom's favorite OC. And he also doesn't do anything in his scene. He just stands there. And so assuming that he has a certain personality, like there's no way we can actually determine that. However, fandom has adopted this sort of, he's more serious, he's more machine-like, sometimes cold, sometimes arrogant, you know, sometimes quiet, right? And a lot of writers write RK900 like that. So that's an interesting, to me, it's a very interesting thing about fandom is that we adopt these things and, you know, a big group of writers go, hey, yeah, I agree with you. That's what we're going to do. And that's how it happens. So how do we get to headcanon, all right? I think RK900 can't fully deviate because CyberLife programmed him to be extra resistant, all right? That's awesome. What a concept for a fic. Okay, that would be a really interesting thing to write about, right? And it's related to canon. You can defend that, why you think that that is true, all right? But here's the thing. It belongs in your work. It doesn't belong in your approach to baiting somebody else's work, all right? Just if you personally think that he can't fully deviate, that's cool, all right? But if you're reading somebody else's shit, don't tell them that they're wrong, all right? Because, again, headcanon is like 2 steps away from canon, right? So you can kind of see that things that, you know, fandom... What, Perkins? Perkins and Nines don't interact. And then Nines is in the gallery, right? So people are like, well, he's in the gallery. Obviously, he's a character. Oh, that oh, God. That's so true. That's so true. Our FBI spy, are you on the call? All right, so here's a more complicated one that I'm going to put to you. All right, facts from the. Oh dear. Okay, facts from the game. Hank Anderson drinks whiskey and beer. We see him drink 3 times in the game. One's the first time you meet him at the bar. He doesn't seem drunk there. And he goes to a crime scene. He's just fine. Second, Connor finds him passed out on the floor of his home. Connor's software says he's passed out because he drank too much, right? Now, when he wakes up Hank there, he absolutely is drunk. But then he has a shower and a short car drive, and they get to the Eden Club, and he's completely functional again, right? The third is at the bridge where Hank has some beer, but again, he seems perfectly coherent and functional, right? So, you know, Fanon says Hank's an alcoholic and he has a drinking problem, all right? And this is, I think Connor drives him, actually. But there are reasons that fandom thinks this, all right? But to talk about, like, the difference between actually canon and Fanon, okay, the game only shows Hank fully drunk that one night, all right? The other time he consumes alcohol, he's completely coherent, and even after he was passed out from being drunk, he notices clues at a crime scene that 2 other, a detective and a cop, both missed, right? And it's one instance of overconsumption can be due to his depression and the fact that the anniversary of Cole's death was very recent, so it is not necessarily canon that he is an alcoholic. The game only shows us 8 days, all right? He had one bad day during 8 days. It doesn't really mean that, you know, he has a problem. Now, again, the gallery says he is an alcoholic. Is the gallery canon? It's not the game. And people like to discard parts of the gallery they don't like and, you know, use other parts that they do like. They just commit crimes. So all that being said, is it reasonable to assume? Absolutely. Okay. I don't write a Hank that doesn't have a drinking problem, but this is where what we're starting to dig into is the difference between what is canon and what is Fanon. All right. And so we move on to headcanon. All right. If your take is that Hank is an alcoholic, you might think, okay, you know, he needs to go to rehab. But one bad night doesn't mean rehab, all right? Or else Atro would be there. and I'm drinking right now. So, you know, a lot of people drink frequently without passing out, without having a problem, without it interfering with their life. So, like, again, if you want to write a fic about Hank and rehab and you want to explore that, that's totally fine. But if you're baiting for somebody and you're trying to tell them that it's unrealistic that Hank isn't treating alcoholism when the alcoholism isn't even explicitly confirmed in canon, that's not really an appropriate way to beta. So come on. So, like, as a beta, Now, here's the point, all right? We all know DC is a shit writer. Okay, so canon may not make sense. Does it make sense that Hank is drunk so much that he yeah, again, less than Adjo drank, okay, passed out on his floor. Is it realistic that after a cold shower, a barf, and a short drive, he's completely coherent? Not only coherent, but functional enough to fight off an android? No, if I actually drank so much that I passed out and threw up, I would be useless for the next 24 hours. All right, I would like absolutely be a waste on the floor. All right. But that's what happened in the source material. All right. So that's canon. Now, as writers, one of the interesting things that we can do is diverge from canon in ways that we think, makes more sense. Right. Yeah, right. It's like that water must have had like sobriety medication in it, because it like that water hit him and he was like all there, Anyway, and kind of like we've said, Fanon and even headcanons, it might be generally accepted by most of fandom or whatever, but the work you're reviewing doesn't have to follow it in the way you respect, and if you can't set your own headcanons aside to like accept somebody else's headcanon as a thing and throw it up on your shirt. All right, when I visit, we're gonna do a replay and I'm gonna chuck ass in the shower and we're gonna see what happens. That's a joke. I really don't want you throwing up while I'm there. That will not be fun. No. Now, that being said, out of character interpretations do actually exist. And if you're asking somebody to beta, you want to know, like, if you don't think X would say that, like, please tell me. I absolutely want to know. What are you doing here? Yeah, really. Anyway, so this is kind of important because one of the most interesting things fanfic can do is ask, what would make character X do thing Y that they wouldn't normally do? The point being that the author has to put in the work. And I'm going to use this phrase a lot, all right? They're selling it to the reader. When it comes to like your own fanon, your headcanon, the conception of your idea, basically you are, as the writer, is trying to sell an idea. And the reader actually really wants to buy it, okay? So the question is, did the writer put in enough work, that the reader wants to buy it? Or did the writer put in a paragraph of work to get somewhere and the reader is not buying it, right? For example, and here's my favorite example, all right? Somebody's saying that Hank is offended by the word fuck, all right? Somebody writes a fanfic trying to tell me that Hank no longer swears and he does not like when people use the word fuck. There's a lot of character development I would have to see in that fic before I would buy it, all right? I would not purchase that as a headcanon. Now, write what you want, okay? Nobody's stopping you from writing a Hank who's suddenly offended by the word fuck, but for me, as a reader, to believe it, you got to do a lot of work. All right, and as an example that I'm going to throw at the chat for a section, what kind of development would have to happen in a fic to make Kara hurt a child and make that believable, right? Kara is a model designed for, household and child care, and she spends most of the game taking care of Alice. She, oh, Bible. Anyway, Kara, she can sometimes be a bit cold to Alice, but that's a choice. She can also be very warm and nurturing with Alice. So, like, how... yes, Gavin is offended by the word fuck. Yes, she can, all right? So, like, do we believe that? Do we think, based on the game, that was a good choice by David Cage? Like, in what situation would she hurt another child? And I think that any good writer can get to anything, but again, you got to put in the work and you got to sell it. So when you're approaching work as a beta, you want to talk with the writer about what kind of assumptions they've made. All right, what about this is your take, and what do you want me to comment on? If you don't care that your character's out of character, then well, for me, maybe I'm not the beta for you because it's something that I care about, but for some people it doesn't really matter. So as a writer, obviously, right? Fuck canon, we do what we want. Yes, you make your own rules as a writer. We are all just here to smash Barbies together, and that's fine. And there will always be parts of the fandom that like you for this. My point is that there are parts of the fandom that just aren't interested in works that stray from canon, and that's okay. But you can't expect your hugely divergent from canon fic to appeal to 100% of the fandom, all right? First example is AUs, all right? I love an AU, all right? I will put those bitches in a coffee shop. I will put them in a restaurant. I will put them in a winery, all right? I will take those characters and drop them into a new scenario and see what happens. It's one of my favorite things to do and one of my favorite ways to explore characterization, all right? But like half of my friends in the Feral server, they don't like AUs. They are not interested in AUs because they specifically want to read about the canon characters in the canon world. They don't want to see Clint Barton in a restaurant, all right? They want to see him in Marvel. And I kind of had to learn that, like, okay, I'm glad they're not on this call because I also think it's a bit weird. And, you know, also kind of as a friend, like, oh, I wrote Clint in a restaurant. It's not finished, but I wrote Natasha and Bucky Barnes own a restaurant. And everybody's in it, including Disaster Tony Stark. So, I've done it. All right. But, like, I kind of had to learn that, like, I'll drop it in after the call. I'll drop it in the chat. Yeah, I actually always meant to go back and finish it. I just it was like I pivoted hard to Good Omens at that time. So, but like the next 2 chapters are almost all entirely written. But yeah, they don't care about werewolves. They don't care about this. They don't care about that. I'm doing a workshop. Sorry. Hey, Murdoch's here. Everybody say hi. Murdoch.
I'm gonna bring in Cass too.
Okay. Murdoch.
He doesn't want me to.
Say hi to the puppy. Say hi to the puppy. You're not going to bark now, are you? Now that I'm on a call? Nope. Okay, that's fine.
Cass will.
Puppo, yes, Cass will bark. We'll get a Cass bark. So anyway, one of the things I had to learn was I can obviously write what I want, but if I want certain friends to read it, I have, you know, they're not gonna change what they like just because I wrote it, and that's fair. That's fine. But some people don't seem to be aware of that. All right. And now we're going to talk about the DBH example, which is Gavin Reed. And this is why I didn't use Gavin as an example before, because somebody's going to fight me on Gavin, and I'm not insulting the Fanon Gavin. But let's be real, Canon Gavin has like maybe 15 lines max, all right? 5 of which are optional and you can't miss, okay? Fandom has created Gavin. He is now part of either the first or second most popular pairing in the entire fandom, all right? So he's become this character that is not representative of what he is in canon, and that's fine, all right? But like some fans just aren't interested in doing that development for Gavin Reed, all right? For many fans, Gavin absolutely comes around on androids, realizes he was wrong usually pretty quickly, and sometimes ends up dating one, sometimes ends up kissing one, you know? And like, that's... They have a Bible. All right? And like, there are a lot of Gavin fans, and this is not trying to be anti-Gavin fans. It's more saying like, if you're writing that Gavin and you're not putting in the work of what I'll call the Zuko redemption arc, because let's be real, Zuko did it best, and you're not putting in that work, there are always going to be people who just don't want to read your fic. So like, yeah, you do what you want, but readers also do what they want, okay? And sometimes what readers want is not to have to buy what they view as a particularly expensive, yeah, Zuko's best. Zuko, nobody did it like Zuko, all right? Only redemption arc I've ever bought, ever, and I mean that. So again, my disclaimer, why should I give a shit what other people think about my fic concept? Obviously you shouldn't, all right? Write what you want. So why am I even bringing it up? It's because the Bang is a public event and a team event, and we have to be able to pair you with at least one partner who's going to be really, really excited about your work. And so when you start getting 7, 8, 9 steps away from canon, you know, oh, toast. Look, season 1 has a lot of filler, all right? But it's so good. It's so good. All right? It picks up about halfway through season 1, and it just fucking kicks ass for all the rest of the show. Anyway, we are not talking about that show, but just imagine the difficulty of matching a concept where you're trying to say that Hank is offended by the word fuck, okay? And you didn't put any work and you just decided that that was what Hank was going to be now. It's going to be hard to match you. So that's the only reason that we're talking about canon and fanon and what is what right now is, you know, because if you're writing, when you're writing in a vacuum, obviously write whatever you want. When you're writing in a group thing where you're going to be with a partner, you know, it's just a different context. So moving on from that, we're going to go back to the writer's point of view and talk about how you work with your beta reader. You would be a blue avatar enjoyer. That makes sense. That makes sense. I can see that. I would suggest skipping to season 2, but I would watch the last 2 episodes of season 1. All right, because they get real serious real fast. So I would absolutely start there and then go on to season 2. But you don't want to miss the Northern Water Tribe. You really don't. You don't want to miss it. It'll be long. I've already been at it in an hour, and we're not. It's gonna be long. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you'll catch at least the end. So, I don't know exactly how long, but I'm about halfway through my slides, and people are going to be probably asking questions at the end of it. So yeah. Okay, so the most important thing about working with a beta reader is always to match your expectations. And I put together these 3 examples, and all 3 of these examples actually happened to me when I was new in fandom and new to baiting, all right? And I use this as my example. I sent my fic to a friend being like, check and see if I made any typos or forgot a word here or there or whatever. And it came back with, it was a long fic, but it came back with like at least 100 comments on stuff. They had gone to, I don't think this part of your plot is very realistic, right? Inline edits, nitpicking all of my word choices, all right? When I kind of just wanted a once over, all right? It's a bit hard to take. Now, imagine like you have a concept and you're not really sure that it works. You're not really sure about your plot, and you're like, you send it to your friend and you want some really good feedback on that, and they find 3 typos and they send it back with nothing else. So you're like, okay, were you not interested? Did you not care? You know, that one doesn't also feel good, right? So, but once you learn to communicate your expectations, right, then you can make sure that you get the right beta for your fic and it comes back with the level of review that you actually wanted. So here's my favorite analogy for baiting. All right, it's like salsa. On one end, you have the mild beta. The mild beta is kind of looking for your spag, your typos, your formatting. They'll point out awkward phrasings, you know, if something doesn't make sense to the reader, but they're not going to do a deep dive. Okay, they're going to let your work stand the way that you wrote it. All right, they're just going to give it a little bit of polish. All right, mild salsa. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the spicy beta. All right, and that's the person who's going to be ruthless. Yeah. Examines the whole work as a whole, the work as a whole, and even if they don't find anything wrong with it, they will make suggestions on how to make it better. All right, so more work for you. They will pick apart all of your plot holes, your characterizations, your assumptions, and they will do sentence level edits, word changes, sentence improvements. Right, medium obviously is the balance in between those two, where you're kind of doing a little bit more than your mild, but you're not diving in as deep as the spicy beta. And yes, it absolutely, you know, if this is your first time baiting for someone, your first time using a beta, it absolutely can have an effect on the level that you're asking for. All right. There are a few people that I would ask a spicy beta of. I would not ask it of many other people. All right. So a long time. Yeah. Well, we're going to take a break in a little bit. I have to like order dinner for tonight. So, I'm going to get through this part and then we're going to take a quick bathroom break. So how do you communicate these expectations? All right. Again, first decide what level of feedback you want. Do you want mild? Do you want medium? Or do you want spicy? All right. Consider the fic length and time commitment. Okay. Time commitment that you're asking of your beta and the time commitment for you reacting to their edits. All right. If this is something that's due tomorrow, you probably don't want a spicy beta because you're not going to have time to adjust a lot of it, right? If it's a 200,000 word bang fic and you're asking for a spicy beta, I really hope they have a whole lot of time on their hands. Tags and flags. This is like important things to let your beta know up front, all right? Is there smut? Are they going to be baiting smut? Some people just aren't comfortable. They'll read it, but they don't want to be the editor, right? Any tags, themes, potential squicks, triggers, right? You want to get those to your beta, but then you want to also ask your beta, where are your hard lines? All right. I once knew a person who, what is that, Cass? Yeah. I said casserole. There's another dog. Casserole. Calm down, please. Please don't hurt Auntie. Please don't hurt Auntie. Hi, you are so gray. He's getting so old. Oh. Doggo, can you hear Doggo? Can we hear Doggo? We can hear Doggo. All my pets are food. He's not, his name is Frank Castle. We just call him Casserole.
It's sometimes green beans.
She said, all your pets are food. You have potato and casserole. Oh. Hi, buddy. No, potato is going to be, who's the fourth character in 15? Noctis, Prompto, Iggy, and Gladio. Yes, Potato was originally going to be Gladio, and now he's just Potato. Yeah, well, Cass is very talkative. We call him Bird because he chirped like Bird. Cass.
Yeah.
No, he whined.
You baby.
Oh no, Milo.
We don't bark.
No bark?
No bark.
No bark, only whine.
Yes, baby.
Woo! There you go. You got to bark.
Auntie.
Don't tackle Auntie. All right. I'm gonna go back to my workshop. Anyway.
You got your cast snugs.
I got my cast snugs. All right. Anyway, this last point, I do want to go back to it because it's important. Okay, I know. I'm sorry. You want to ask your beta where their lines are. All right. I know a person in Good Omens fandom who could not deal with the mention of eggs. Personal trigger. Don't really want to get into it. All right. But like, I would not have warned them for eggs in my fic. All right. But like, they just didn't want to ever read the word. Okay, and so you want to ask your beta, like, is there anything that you will not read or that you will be horrified if you read, so that, you want to, it's a conversation that you want to have to set your expectations going into that fic, right? Okay, remember, not all betas are comfortable delivering different levels, all right? Some betas aren't comfortable with a spicy beta, but at the same time, some betas aren't interested in the mild level. They're like, if I'm only going to be checking your spelling and grammar, like, make Google Docs do it. I'm not going to do that. They're only interested if they can actually dive into the meat of your story, right? And just appreciate your beta. All this time that you spend communicating the expectations and doing this other stuff, the beta could be doing something else. They're doing you a favor. So as you're communicating the expectations, just be really No, it wasn't even eggs like that, okay? I was once talking about the fact that I made scrambled eggs for breakfast. And they left a server. I'm not joking. Now, again, I'm very sorry that they have that trigger, that it is that bad for them. Okay? No, oh, fuck you. I make good eggs. You can suck a dick. So, what do I do while my beta's working on my fic? All right, like, what am I supposed to do with my fic if they're in there? Like, should I keep working on it and whatever? No, you need to give your beta space to work. All right, if you guys are both trying to edit at the same time, you might add something completely wrong to a section that they're not going to look at because they've already read it. All right, hovering over somebody's shoulder, like if your boss was hovering over your shoulder while you were working, like, that's not cool to do. It makes it really awkward. Makes it really weird. Also, reading somebody live editing my work is literally what they're going to do to me in hell. Okay, I know how I'm going to be punished for my sins on this mortal plane. They're going to send me to Disney World or Disney, whichever one's in Florida. All right, there are going to be a lot of screaming children. It's going to be very warm. I'm going to be standing next to a trash can with bees going in and out, and someone's going to be live editing my own work in front of me. That's how they're going to punish me. All right, so like that, just know. Take all that energy. Toast, I swear to God, it's like one time. It's like one time I do a thing, and it nobody ever forgets, right? But my friend Ree actually had a good thing. I quoted the whole thing. All right, while your work is off the beta, go read a book. All right, read a book. Now, there's lots of really good fic. There are lots of really bad books. I'm not saying that books are better, but books read differently because they have to create their own universes, right? So go see how somebody who got published does it, and then let the things that you learn from that book affect your work when it comes back. I loved that piece of advice from Marie, so I wanted to include it in here for everybody. So, you set up the expectations for the fic, then they reviewed the fic, and then you get the fic back and it's got all these suggestions in it. So like, what do you do if you don't agree with what your beta is saying? And the point is, you remain the creator and the controller of your fic. Okay, your beta's suggestions are just suggestions and you don't have to accept any that you don't like. Have you never seen Pull the Trigger Piglet? Pull the Trigger Piglet is like one of my favorite fucking, just look up, Google Pull the Trigger Piglet. I'm not going to put it on here. The point of that image is, right, talk to your beta about the comments that they made. If you're confused, it's worth considering why they made the suggestion, even if you don't like what they suggested. Like, if it didn't work for them, maybe see if you can come up with something else. Remember that the beta has your best interest in heart and wants the fic to be amazing. But in the end, it's the writer that pulls the trigger on whether they're going to take that suggestion or not. The writer remains the owner of the fic and the final decision, right? Oh, yes. Come on. It's one of my favorites. Pull the trigger, Piglet like lives like rent-free in my head. All right. Here's some writer do's and don'ts. Kind of they're the same as, yes. That was one of the points I made before. Don't be upset if your suggestions aren't used, because the writer is the one who gets to make the writer's the one who gets to pull the trigger, Piglet. Good things to do. Let your beta know how you take feedback. All right. Even if you've asked for a spicy beta, if you need things, explained gently, then let your beta know. All right. One good thing to do is prep questions. Right. If there's something in a chapter that you aren't sure that works, you don't want to say it at the beginning of the chapter, because then you're going to color how your beta reads it. But you might want to leave a note at the end of the chapter. Be like, did this work for you? Yes. Thank you. But you can leave some questions at the end of the chapter, like, I was worried about this. Did it work for you? Right? Ask questions about the critique. I would say always credit your beta, but sometimes a beta doesn't want to be credited. Okay. Like, if it's a fandom, they don't want to know they don't want people to know that they beta in. They may not want to be credited. If they're baiting your smut, but they don't post anything above a G rating, they may not want to be credited. All right. Otherwise, in every other case, ask your beta how they want to be credited and if you can link anything for them because they did you a favor. Right. Things maybe to avoid, maybe not to do. All right. Ignore every comment that they make. If you're going to ignore all their suggestions, why did you go to a beta, right? Argue with every comment that they make. I've baited for people who I'll say, hey, this phrasing isn't working for me. And they'll come back and be like, well, I specifically picked this word because I wanted this. And I specifically said that because I wanted that. Like, with every comment that I made. If you're going to argue with every comment that a beta makes, just save your time and your beta's time. Don't do it. All right. Do not take criticism of your writing as a personal insult. Now, this one takes time. If you've never had your work reviewed, all right, the first couple times somebody goes spicy on you, like, yeah. If the first time somebody goes spicy on you, it can be a bit hard, but like, they are trying to help your fic be as awesome as possible. And if they say the sentence doesn't work for me, it does not mean you are a terrible person. And it doesn't even mean you are a terrible writer. It means you're not conveying what you want to, right? Or you forgot a word, you dumb fuck. Like, once again, this was the same in the beta do's and don'ts. Don't insist your take is the only correct take in all of fandom. And another thing to think about when you are a writer, don't put your work down, all right? Or be overly negative. Like, yay! If you go into beta and going, yeah, I'm really bad at dialogue and I know that, and I know it's going to be bad and I know you're not going to like it, your beta is not going to approach your dialogue with, an open mind. They're going to approach it being like, oh, this person said they were bad at dialogue. So if you're actually good at dialogue, they're going to be like, they're not going to believe me if I say that. And if you actually do suck at dialogue, they're going to be like, well, now if I critique it, they're going to think that I'm picking on them, right? So just, it's like putting this story sucks in the summary or putting I suck at summaries in the summary. All right. You are setting yourself up for failure. Okay. You're asking for beta to make your work better. And it's not because your work sucks. It's because you want to take that extra step. Come on. So what if I fucked up? All right. Sometimes a writer beta combination just does not work out. All right. Yes. Same goes for summaries. Absolutely. But so what do you do if you, that's good. What do you do if you've started, you have somebody who's baiting, let's say a chapter fic and it's going on and you just don't think they're good fic, or you're a beta and you don't really think that the writer is jiving with your style or whatever. All right. Like maybe you thought you vibed and it turns out that you vibe in fandom, but you don't vibe in this particular relationship, right? Maybe you have significantly different takes on this particular idea and you'll be able to work together on something, on a different work, right? The key is to don't stress about it and don't lie, because that's how you get ants. All right. If you make up a lie like, oh, I'm really busy, I'm not going to have time to beta for you, or I'm really busy, I'm not going to have time to post. All right. This person's going to then see you in fandom in 2 months and be like, oh, I thought you were really busy. And what's up with that? And that's how you get ants. Yes. That's how you get ants. So you want to be honest while being kind, all right? And I've put together 2 stock conversation starters, all right? If you are ever in this situation and you remember this presentation, you can come back and you can crib my little outline here, all right? If the writer, you just kind of say, I think we're on different pages, and I don't want to waste your valuable editing time, all right? That's the key. You are recognizing that the other person is offering value and you want that value to go somewhere else. All right. Mention that you appreciate the work, and if they've done something specific that you like, it's a great way to smooth it over by bringing that up, right? As a beta, it's the same kind of thing. I'm not the ideal beta for your story, and because I want your story to be the best it can, again, you are acknowledging the value of that other person's work, but, you know, you're saying, I can't be that, so I'm going to bow out. Hope you can find someone who's a better fit. And again, if you can, you know, specifically compliment something about the work that you really liked or your interactions that you really liked. The other thing to note about both of these is that it's not a question. It is a statement. Okay. You are hitting the bricks. You are just walking out. All right. It does not leave it open for discussion because you don't have to. If you decide that you are not jiving, you don't have to like talk to that person about how they can change their style. You can just say, hey, this isn't working. I still want to be your friend. Your time's valuable. Let's do something else, right? So I wanted to put those templates out there because I know a lot of people worry, well, what if I get a beta and then I don't like them? Or what if I get a beta and it's not working out? Or what if I'm a beta and the writer's being a real asshole? Well, here you go. Here's your script. Have fun. Okay. So we're going to move on to how we find a beta reader, but we're going to take a 2-minute pee break. Anybody wants to get off mute and talk, go ahead. I need to go order food for my family. I'll be right back. Oh, I've returned. Ordering food now. Talk amongst yourselves. Oh yeah, you're welcome. Some people just really appreciate having a script, and it's conversation that I've had to have, so, you know, have fun with your script. All right, come on. Loading Grubhub. I'm sure you're tired. You've worked like 1,000,000 hours this week. Close. Please open. Yeah, that'll do it. I have definitely been there. We are ordering Thai food, if anyone was curious. And we want... No, not picked for me. I want pad thai. As a 1. Ooh, that's fair. Yeah, I got 4 hours of sleep last night also, so yeah. But I'm always in that club, so it's a stupid club. This guy with chicken at a 0.
It's the worst club.
Yeah, it sucks. At a 0. And then Dad wants red curry. Red curry. Where's red curry? There we go. Red curry. Vegetable. Spicy level 2. All right. Yeah. Well, I've already, like, my parents are actually in the other room watching a movie. And I've already said the word cock like 18,000 times. So, high five, team. Okay, well, the order is in. And so I'm just going to, push. Yeah, you definitely don't. You really don't. So, here's a question, all right? How the fuck am I going to find a beta reader? If you think they're so important and they're so good at what they do, how do I find one? All right? So, 3 different methods you can do here. Friends, Romans, countrymen, right? Yeah, we were obviously referring to birds. If you have writer friends, there's a good chance at least one of them will be really willing to beta read for you, all right? Especially if you start at a lower level and you don't ask them for 5 hours of their time. You just ask them to kind of look something over. And especially if you offer to trade, all right? I'll beta your fic, you beta mine, right? And as I've been saying the whole time, other fandom friends, they don't have to write, all right? They can still help you find things that don't make sense or things that can be improved in your story, right? So going to Romans, the bank server, we have a beta role for people, and it's a voluntary role that people have to sign up with themselves, all right? And that means that they are willing to be pinged about beta services. It also means that when they don't want to be pinged, they can just unselect the role themselves. So, like, you don't have to worry about using it. It's there to be used. It's there for people to, come on. Yeah, you can tip. There we go. Place my order. It's there to be used. There's also the channel for find a beta if you're too shy to use a ping, but don't be, because the whole point of the role is to use it to ping. But you can also use the channel to request beta services. And again, I want to say it's not just for bang work. Okay, like our server is focused on the event, all right, and the fandom. But like, honestly, if you really wanted to find a beta, and for some reason you think our server is the best place to find a beta for some other fandom, like, go ahead. It's just one ping. You know, don't ping it 15 times, but like, maybe you will find somebody in Good Omens or something else, you know, that just happens to be a beta and have the time to do it. So now, how do we talk about fandom? All right, it can be scary to reach out to a fandom stranger, but like, if you're reading and commenting on a fic, you can feel free to ask the author if they know a beta, or if they beta themselves, you know, or if the beta that they used is open to, you know, working with strangers or whatever. And like, yeah, it feels awkward, but like, if it's your only comment on that fic, obviously that's going to be awkward. But if it's like a fic that you've been following or whatever, like, worst case scenario, you don't get an answer and you try something else, right? And I also want to talk about Countryman 2.0, okay? Just get out there, read, comment, and post. If you start posting your work and it's a multi-chapter work and you mention you don't have a beta and you would love to find one, you might get lucky. I actually have a friend who ended up being a beta because they were commenting on their work, on a work chapter by chapter, and this person was like, yo, your comments are really good. Do you beta? I have a new project and I would really, really like your input, all right? I also want to point out, you can have more than one beta, all right? If you have a friend who doesn't know your fandom at all, they can still look for spelling and grammar. They can still look for typos. They can still look for phrasings that don't make sense. Step one, have friends. Whoops. But you know, you can combine. You can have more than one beta. You could have a friend who doesn't know the canon, but they can read for the details. You can have a friend who, you know, maybe isn't comfortable for English spelling and grammar, but they'll read for, you know, plot or flow or whatever. If you have been posting in the bank server and you have cheerleaders who've been liking your work, maybe ask them, you know, hey, I'm really worried about this part. Do you want to jump in DMs and like see, you know, give me some more detail about what it is you like about this. Is there anything that you don't like about? No, you're not. Toast. Okay, so here we go. Before the beta, it's about editing your own work, all right? And this is where we're going to go through some stylistic things, some interesting things, and of course all the tips go also to baiting somebody else's work. But this is why I said we're going backwards. We are now at the initiating step, all right? You are looking at your own work, unless you want it to be. I mean, I marry everybody in fandom, but that doesn't mean like other people have to. So, an upfront reminder, okay? A lot of writers break a lot of the things that we're going to call rules, okay? And the key to this is that you kind of need to understand the rules in order to break them, not only intentionally, but for best effect, okay? No, I would not marry the whole fandom. I marry a lot of people in fandom, but, you know, would definitely not marry the whole fandom. But anyway, so like, let's say you are the writer wants to express that a character isn't very book smart, but they want to show it rather than tell it. So they might maybe have that character's grammar not be good, or they might have them misunderstand something or misquote a common phrase, or just, you know, something that would be viewed as breaking a grammar rule. But, yeah, our fucking polycule is the best. Doesn't even consider all of my feral husbands either, but that's okay. So additionally, like, one thing that I do, I'll use sentence fragments and a lot of interesting punctuation when I'm trying to convey that something is, you know, tense or urgent, right? So you don't have to follow every rule, but you kind of need to understand what the rules are. So set yourself up for success when you're writing. These are things, again, what I'm doing here, I'm figuring, you know, everybody kind of knows how to write, knows how to edit in their own way. I wanted to mention things that you may not do or you may not know about that are going to make editing your fic easier and make your end product better, right? So something that, you know, I do, use an easily searchable placeholder or flag when you're in the zone you're writing, but you know you need to go to back. Okay, my friend uses the coding indicator $, right? So she'll put $, main enemy, all right? Say she hasn't come up with a name that she wants for the main enemy, but she just had a breakthrough on the scene that she wants to write. So she will write it using $ main enemy. And then all you have to do is a find and replace when she's come up with that name, all right? And like that works for her. I have to come up with my names ahead of time, but that works for her. And if you're the kind of person like, you know, a scene that you want, but you haven't decided where it is, you might do $ place, right? And then when you figure it out, you just go back and replace it, all right? Butts is my placeholder because as much as I talk about butts, I don't really write the word butts a lot, all right? And it's what I use, like, if there's exposition that I'm stuck on and I want to get to the next scene, or I'm not actually sure I need something there, but I want to come back and check how it flows, and if I need something there, hey, that's InSim, come on. It's my guy. So like that's a placeholder where it's like, I don't know if I have to write something new or not, but I'm moving forward because another scene is in my head. Come back and check this later. So it's just a way you can kind of set yourself up for editing success and for writing success because you're skipping something that you're stuck on. Captain America, that's good. And yeah, I've seen Asho bring in the other fandoms. I actually have started doing that just for fun. All right, like my Good Omens fic has the Jarrah crew in it as employees of Crowley's workshop or Crowley's shop, and then the Coffee AU that I wrote in 2023, the staff there are the teenagers from Stranger Things. So I absolutely do the same thing. All right, second thing, and this is one that I don't do, but when I started talking to people, some people do this, and I'm kind of curious about it, all right? Mark the scenes that you aren't sure of as you write, all right? So, like, if you're writing something you don't think it's flowing, use a highlighter or, like, a different font color or something so that you kind of know when you go back to edit that you weren't sure about this when you're writing it. Alternately, if you write a sentence and you're like, this sentence fucks, right? Highlight it in a different color or make that font a different color, all right? Because then when you go back and you reread it, you can either be like, oh, I thought this was great and it's actually kind of boring, or you can be like, yes, I want to do this over and over and over, all right? And you might, you know, surprise yourself when you're editing. Yeah, leave comments on your stuff, that kind of thing. Like if you think a scene is either really, really good or really bad, leave that for yourself, all right? So that when you go back in your edits, you kind of have that feeling as your first take, right? And again, don't be afraid to kill your darlings, but my advice here is use scrap page. Kill your darlings is the term for like, you just wrote a really, really good scene, all right? But then as the fic starts to come together, that scene's just not working with the rest of it. Now, a lot of times people are like, but it's a really good scene, so I don't want to cut it. And you kind of work to make it work in the fic, and it usually does not come out in your favor, all right? Because people can tell that it doesn't, no matter how good the writing is, if it doesn't fit with the fic, it's not going to work, all right? So it may have to go. But the one tip here is use a scrap page, all right? Do not just delete that. Take it, and, you know, I write in Scrivener, so I actually just have a page called scrap page, and I copy it all there. Create yourself a Google document that says scrap page for whatever project, right? Because, you know, maybe you'll get to a different point in the story where it can come back and it works better. Or, you know, reuse it, recycle it to a new fic idea if you really like the concept that good. A lot of times people like think kill your darlings is just like, I have to delete this and it cannot exist. No, save it, you idiot. Like, set yourself up for using it somewhere else, right? Yeah, that's what I like about using Scrivener, actually, is because I have, like, I can have all my references in the same, in the, what do you call it, index column. So here's some quick tips on editing yourself. Let it breathe. All right. People don't like this because, like, especially me, if I write a one shot, I want to post it. And I go, you know, no beta, we die like Connor Detroit, and I post it. But when you're working on something that, you know, is significant and meaningful to you, definitely take a few days. All right. Give yourself some space. It lets you forget what you wrote. So when you read it, it feels new-ish. All right. And it's way better forgetting what you meant to say, and then, like, it shows you what you're missing. All right. And yes, it is best to just take a long time and go absolutely reset your brain and do something else, right? Mechanical tricks. These were interesting to me, all right? They're all about seeing your work, reading or seeing your work in a different format, all right? That's how you catch your typos, your bad autocorrects, your awkward phrasings, things that don't work, all right? This is things like change the font. I know people who swear by Comic Sans. They put their fic into Comic Sans, and yes, exactly. And you suddenly find all of your typos and all of your mistakes, right? Read it out loud to your pet, okay? Dialogue, especially if I'm writing dialogue and I don't think that I'm writing it correctly, I say it to whichever cat is nearest. I will read it out loud to that cat, because when it is coming out of your mouth, you realize, like, yes, this is something a person would say, or no, this is definitely not something an absolute person would say. Yeah, yes, okay, read on a different device or copy it into a different format. It's the same version of this trick, all right? One of the things that I saw recommended a lot was putting it into a like, if there's a paragraph you're struggling with, put it in a text to speech. Make something else read it to you. And then when you're hearing it, you're going to go, oh my God, that is not what I thought I wrote, you know? And you find it. Or read it on a different device. Again, it's this just changing up the format where you see your work, flipping the yes, exactly. You know, you want to find typos, take your document and read it on your phone, you know? You know, especially if you hate reading on your phone, because then you're going to be scrolling through and you're going to just see all the fucking typos and whatever. Yes. Read it out loud to your animal or your spouse or yourself. Oh, yeah. Yes. Art. I absolutely believe that. Yep. I absolutely believe that. Psychological damage. And I just wanted to point out, reviewing canon, especially in a canon like DBH, where like there are multiple outcomes, there are so many different layers, so many different ways a character can play the first game. Never like be ashamed to do a refresh. All right, you know, it's a long game. You don't absolutely have to like, you know, replay the whole thing, but like it helps anchor your characterization, whatever plot points you're drawing on from canon. It's just kind of a best practice, all right? Especially canon, like if you only played DBH once in 2018 and you've been consuming fanfic for the rest of the time and you've never actually kind of gone back to do a refresh, like you'd be surprised. Things that you see that you're like, oh, I didn't remember that, or oh, yes, okay, so you're up there with the yeah, okay, so in Scrivener, I actually have a timeline. It's funny you say dates and times. I have a timeline of, you know, years, like it begins when Carl was born, because he's the oldest character with a birthday, all right? And I literally spell out the years that everybody was born and the years that things happen, and then when it gets to the game, I have a timeline. It goes into every Scrivener file that I create for a fic for this game. It's in our stupid Postman Scrivener file, even though the Postman fic is not at all based on the game. It's still in there because it's a reference that I can look at when I'm like looking at, you know, like trying to get a, yes, I also have the script bookmark. That script website is insane. Such a good resource. All right, so here's the thing. I actually had a couple slides where I was going to go over grammar, and then I was like, I actually just don't want to talk about this and nobody's going to be interested in it, all right? There are so many resources online that are going to help you check grammar, confirm your grammar, look up grammar, all right? I've got some sources. I've got a reference slide at the end of this that has some sources where you can go to learn about grammar. So I decided, again, I was going to focus on advanced style tips and tricks, all right? And this is kind of for writers who want to go back and edit their work and step it up a next level, all right? What are things that you may not think about when you're writing? And all of these examples that I've got, I learned the hard way. Okay, I learned because I did them non-ideally and a beta beat my ass, all right? So I'm not coming at you with these tips and tricks being like, huh, I'm a professional and you suck. I'm coming with like, this is like, no. But it's things that aren't hard and fast grammar rules, all right? There are some things that are specifically wrong, but then there's some times that it's like, this isn't necessarily wrong against grammar, but here's a better way to do it that helps you make your fic more unique and more yours, all right? And all these tips work for writers and betas both, okay? So they, you know, bringing it all back in. And it's also kind of a list of, I'm going to say my pet peeves, which isn't, you know, necessarily fair, because I'm sure one of you is going to be like, oh, I do that, and then I'm going to feel really bad for saying that. But like, again, it's also stuff that I've gotten my ass kicked on, and so I'm bringing it back. All right. So the first one, you hear a lot when you're talking about writing, telling versus showing. What does that actually mean? Okay. So take a second and read these two snippets, and we're going to go through it. All right. The tongue's bad. No, I hate that one. Telling is this first example, okay? Kara was upset. Alice had been bad. Kara yelled. Alice started to cry, okay? You are telling the reader specifically what happened. Again, there's nothing grammatically wrong with it, okay? But you read the second one, it is showing. It's using the character's actions and using descriptive words about them to show more about what's happening in the scene, all right? More detail, more like that. Most readers prefer to be shown because it gives you a better understanding of the actual scene, of what's happening. It's more individual, okay? If I told you guys to take that first paragraph and rewrite it to show rather than tell, we would all do it differently, okay? Please do it. That's your artist assignment. We would all do it differently. And so this is kind of, it makes the writing stand out. It makes the scene feel more realistic. All right. Now, again, there's nothing grammatically wrong with telling. And sometimes in a scene, when you're trying to just get a point across, sometimes you end up doing it. But when people talk about readers preferring to be shown, this is kind of what it means. All right. So let's talk about head hopping. Okay. Take a look at these. In the previous slide, we just established that we are in Kara's point of view. All right. We are in Kara's head. So in this first example, we're in Kara's head, and then all of a sudden we suddenly know that Alice is embarrassed and that she didn't mean to eat so many cookies, okay? How do we know that? If Kara's not a mind reader and Alice isn't like projecting, all right, we've head hopped from Kara's point of view, POV, to suddenly knowing what Alice is experiencing, okay? So let's go to the middle. I want to talk about all this in a second, but let's go to the middle sample, okay? We're dodging this by using some qualifiers, okay? Alice seemed embarrassed. She probably didn't mean to do that. She looked away because she was upset, okay? So we're kind of trying to dodge it with qualifying it, but like it's still, Kara knows too much about what Alice is feeling and thinking. It's like head hopping junior, okay? The third one, what I'm trying to do here, okay, it uses Kara's own mental processes and her personal experience with Alice previously, okay? So yes, it's still making assumptions about what Alice is feeling, but it's in a much more realistic way for Kara in Kara's head, okay? Alice's cheeks flush, so she's blushing with what Kara assumed was embarrassment, okay? So, you know, she is reacting to a physical reaction that Alice is saying rather than just flat out Alice was embarrassed, right? She would meet Kara's eyes. That was what Alice did when upset. Okay, so again, she's drawing on a history that you can buy that Kara and Alice have that she could reasonably make that conclusion, all right? Now, people like to write from different points of view, right? But usually you use like a scene change indicator, you know, an asterisk or a line or something. Actually, this is the other thing I was going to bring up was there is a third person omniscient, but Fanon doesn't really write third person omniscient, all right? Fanon really likes to get into one person's point of view and then head hop. So if you're, you know, kind of trying to write third person omniscient, you know, with like a really big cast or whatever, like it's very difficult to do, you know, from a Fanish perspective, right? And yeah, I would say section breaks are the way to do it. Okay, if the first one had a section break and we went from Kara's point of view into Alice's point of view, that's absolutely, you know, that's not only fine, that's encouraged, all right? That is the more appropriate way to do a point of view change, all right? But when you are anchoring Kara's point of view and then suddenly we're talking about what Alice is feeling, you're head hopping, all right? And that's not great. So again, these are things you might not think about when you're writing your fic, but when you go back to edit, pay a little attention to whether or not you're head hopping, you know, see if you've accidentally done it. I remember one of the first, back in live journal days, all right, there were Final Fantasy communities where you would get 100 prompts and you would try to write 100 short fics for that prompt list, right? And I remember one of the first ones I picked, I did this, all right, and I didn't do a scene break. I just went from one POV to the other. And somebody called me on it. And I was like, holy shit, that's so important. Why am I not doing that? You know, and like ever since then, I've been entirely picky with my own writing about establishing point of view, staying in point of view, not what would this character know? How would this character react? And like, what would they know about the other person? What would they guess about the other person? And what would they specifically not know? All right. Like, you know, Kara would not know what Alice is thinking. She can kind of make some guesses based on physical reactions, but she wouldn't know. Yes, if the edit of an art, please, if you're posting a role play, please say that it's a role play and make it clear when it's switching, because when I read a fic and I think that it's a fic and it's actually a role play and you're switching point of view and you didn't indicate that, it drives me insane. Yes. Come on, where's my fucking mouse? Where's my mouse? Hello? Okay. Now, the one we hear a lot about is passive versus active voice, right? So, first example here, right, uses the word there and versions of the verb to be. Okay, there were tears on Alice's face. There was something in Alice's pocket. The cookies were removed from Alice's pocket, right? Again, grammatically it happens, right? But you'll notice passive voice. Yep. Passive voice, the action is kind of happening vaguely, all right? In active voice, the person performing the action is the subject, okay? Alice cried softly, all right? Kara noticed Alice's pockets were full, okay? Now, again, there's a were, but it's not that there was something, okay? That's the vague, yeah. And then instead of the cookies were removed from Alice's pocket, doesn't really even make sense as a sentence, right? Alice reached into her pocket and pulled out cookies, okay? The second, active voice uses more direct descriptions of the actions and the observations. And again, this can be a style choice. There are parts where passive voice can help set a mood or something like that. But again, just like telling versus showing, most readers usually prefer the more active voice. 1 second, I need a drink of water. So here we go. This is one. Dialogue tagging is a big deal for me. All right. Take a second, read the first one, and then read the second one. The second one is the correct one. When you read the first one, the improper tagging, okay, as in your formatting and the arrangement, makes it very unclear who's speaking. Okay. The grammar rule is that you start a new paragraph when the speaker changes. The point is that the dialogue in the paragraph will be associated with the next name mentioned in the paragraph. All right, yeah, then they made out. Yep. You're gonna see a lot of Marcus and Connor making out in the next couple slides, right? So the grammar rule is start a new paragraph when the speaker changes. All right. In this first one, and this is something that I see people do, is where they'll start a new paragraph to make some emphasis. Okay, Connor paused, and so the next thing Connor says is on the next line. All right, but then they said that and then put Marcus laughed, so it looks like Marcus is saying that. And then they did the same thing in the next run. It looks like Connor's saying that. It's not really clear who is actually speaking. The second one, because of the formatting and because it's almost the same exact words, it's just rearranged and reordered. It breaks up the speech and the action, so the speakers alternate paragraphs, so it's really clear who's saying which sentences, all right? And this is actually something, like, if you do it, I'm not, like, digging on you, but, like, this will actually make me back out of a fic, all right? If you're getting into dialogue and you're mixing up your tags and I lose who is saying what, I can't read it, all right? You can actually just don't cross your streams, right? It can muddy an entire conversation, all right? Now, the next two slides are also about dialogue, because there are some interesting ways you can tag your dialogue, but just make sure the formatting and the arrangement and the way that you are lining up what is said with the comment that you're making on it, make sure that it keeps it very clear who is speaking. I would say, yeah, it's pretty much not, anytime I come across it, I don't think it's intentional. I don't think we're supposed to be confused. So, dialogue words, all right? And this is one, people also may not think about, all right? This first example, read it, is just for fun, comma, Marcus laughed, all right? Here's the thing, you can't laugh a sentence, right? It's not a verbal action. You can't sneer a sentence. You can't console a sentence, all right? So people use these words to replace the word said, all right? But they're using words that aren't verbal actions that you can't actually do, all right? Second example uses the invisible word said, and it also, when you want to add color to how something is said, it uses actual speaking terms. Okay, you can retort in a sentence, you can quip a sentence, right? So when you're trying to replace the word said, okay, words like said and asked, they're called, well, okay, here's the thing. Okay, if it said it's just for fun, period, Marcus laughed, I'd buy that. Or it's just for fun, comma, Marcus said laughing, all right? You can absolutely, like, laugh while speaking, but you cannot laugh a sentence, all right? So, like, it's you know, yeah, it's nitpicking and it's a style thing, and a lot of people like to do that anyway, okay? Because even if you can't sneer a sentence, they want to show that Connor's sneering, all right? In my experience, I mean, sometimes people trip on that, all right? I had a beta who tore me apart because I did that. I used laughed a long time, you know? So, like, it also depends on your reader and it depends on the style of your writing. But, again, we're talking about style right now with no official rules, right? Words like said and asked are invisible tags because the reader, you basically skim them, okay? You focus on the dialogue. You really kind of don't read the word said, all right? Other words are called visible tags because they add emphasis to how a thing was said. And the point here being good writing uses both, all right? If you repeat said all the time, yeah, it can become pretty boring. But if you use too many visible tags, then that really becomes distracting. Okay, if every single line is whispered or shouted or, you know, done in a certain way and you're not using the word said, that can also throw the reader out of a fic, all right? Funny you said that because action beats. Not all dialogue actually needs to be tagged, right? You know, here's our, the first one is from the previous slide, right? The second sample doesn't have any dialogue tagging at all right? It is arranged so that you can clearly tell who's saying, but I'm using the actions that are happening as they're talking to not only indicate the conversation that's going on, but indicate what they're doing during the conversation. It allows scenes to be much more descriptive. And again, as long as you're using your paragraphs properly and, you know, and you don't even need to tag every line if you only have two people, okay? You can just kind of, you know, you could just have dialogue if you are going back and forth between two people. You don't even need an action beat sometimes, all right? But action beats help to anchor who is speaking after you've been going on for a while. Yes. Well, and again, you know, if like every single sentence is described with an action, that's also going to get tiring for the reader, because it's like, if I'm having a conversation with somebody, I don't do something every time I say something, right? You know, so you kind of want a couple invisible tags like said or asked, all right? You want a couple descriptors. You want a couple said with an adverb, like said somethingly, said quietly, said whatever. You want a couple with action beats, and you want a couple that don't have anything. All right, yeah. You want to mix it up. They keep making out. Well, it's, you know, it's Detroit Become Human. We just keep restarting the scene over and over. We're making different choices, right? Hitting different QTEs here on our dialogue. Are you ready for the next one? Because I know at least one person's going to scream. Epithets, also known as titles or indicators. Okay. This is a big one. Yeah. And those of us who are fandom olds have actually been scarred by a couple of these. I have literally read Final Fantasy VII fanfiction that used the silverette as a descriptor for a person. All right. Sometimes these are entirely, yes. Sometimes these are entirely reasonable to use, and sometimes they're really not. And it depends on, again, anchoring yourself in the head of the POV. It was Sephiroth and then the wanky Sephiroth clones that were in Advent Children. Yeah. They were all silverettes, you know. Even though, like, ETTE is, like, supposedly the feminine ending, right? So, tell me they weren't wanky. So, yeah. The first situation we're going to talk about is when you're naturally describing a character's relationship with another character, okay? And the point here is that this is how the first character would think about the second character, okay? Kara looked at her daughter. She would think my daughter about Alice, and so that is something that she might think, Okay, Hank rolled his eyes at his colleague. All right, he would think of that person as a colleague or a coworker. He might introduce, say, hey, this is my coworker Gavin, right? Gavin mock saluted the captain. Okay, another time epithets are okay to use is when they're titles. All right, he probably wouldn't think of Captain Fowler as Jeff, right? He would think of him as the captain. So in those cases, they're obviously okay to use. You probably don't want to use it every single time. You want to alternate with that person's name, but like it is a natural way the point of view character would think about the other character. So it makes sense for them to use that in their head. Occasions where one character doesn't know the other or doesn't know their name. Okay, so North in the emergency room. I'm afraid you've broken your arm, North, the doctor said. All right, she doesn't know this doctor. He may not have a name tag. It makes sense to be referring to them as their occupation, right? It makes sense that your internal thoughts would refer to them. All right, coffee for Fowler, the barista said. The barista looked around, right? When I go out to a bar, I don't think of my bartender as Mary, if it says Mary on their name tag. Oh, bye, thank you for coming. I would think about them as my bartender, So in occasions where you don't know the other character or their name, there absolutely makes sense to think. All right. Baldette. That makes sense. All right. Now, where people try to defend the use of epithets is occasions where you have to differentiate people or pronouns and you don't want to repeat names a lot. All right, so like you have a scene with two guys in it and you don't want to repeat their names a lot, and using he doesn't tell you which character's talking. All right, and it leads to things like the brunette or the shorter man. And here's the thing, I don't mentally refer to other people using their hair color or their height, or like, I don't say, oh yeah, my friend the blonde. No, I'd say like my friend Jeff. Okay. Like you don't naturally think those things. All right. And also, is that descriptor important to the characterization or your story? Okay. If your guy is in a room looking at people and he wants to like find the biggest man to go on a mission, then using the epithet the larger man might actually make sense in that context, right? Otherwise, you can't tell me that you think about that like you describe other people when you see them like, yeah, the redhead did, okay? So, and that's what the use of these terms, like it just kind of throws you out, because Marcus isn't going to think about Connor as the brunette because he knows Connor, he knows Connor's name, all right? He's going to think about him as Connor. Now, the other time that I've seen people defending them, spaces you want to remind people of details about a character. Okay, so you're in Carl's point of view, but you want to remind people that he's an artist. All right, Marcus making coffee. You want to remind people that he led the revolution, then he left it. And this is another one. Do you mentally refer to yourself or your friends by like your occupation or your previous job or some interesting detail about you? Like, do you think about yourself as like, I am the lesbian? Like, people don't do that, okay? If you want to remind people about details about the character, work it into the story, okay? And that's kind of my point here and all of the advice that I found on these. If you find that you're repeating names too much or your pronoun usage is getting confusing, it's your writing, okay? Don't replace it with an epithet. Change up your sentence structure, change up your approach, use different dialogue tagging, add some actions, add some descriptions, okay? Carl was awake and waiting for his coffee. He looked at the way the light came in the window and wished he had something to sketch on, all right? There's a great way to remind the reader that Carl is an artist that actually provides interesting details about Carl, all right? Rather than calling him the artist, right? I can be the gray-haired brunette, okay? I'm like half gray at this point. The raven-haired man, yes. Or like, the blue-eyed guy. I saw Lav use that earlier. Like, I don't refer to my friends by their eye color. They're lucky if I know their eye color, But again, if you find yourself trying to justify the use of something like the tall brunette, it's your writing, okay? First of all, names you used in a scene eventually become invisible words, all right? It's like using the word cock, okay? It becomes invisible because we get used to reading it. All right? It's just like reading said. We know what's going on and our brain does not, get hung up on it. So if you think that you're repeating names too much, if you think that your scene is getting confusing, if you think that you can justify the tall brunette, stop head hopping. All right, stop it, and stop pretending that that is an important thing to think about somebody else. All right, go back to your writing and go through your sentence structure and mix it up. We are used to the word cock. So here we are. We're at the end. You guys ready for your prize? Because the prize is coming. Prize is coming. Gaze lovingly into her orbs. In conclusion, we're going to kind of go backwards from the presentation anyway, right? Editing your work is more than spelling and basic grammar, all right? Even if you're following basic grammar, there could be things that you're doing, like we just talked about, that are confusing your readers or kind of pinging your readers out of the story, or could just be things that you can get better at in the future. Just like that, baiting is more than editing. Okay, you aren't just looking at somebody's spelling and grammar and word choice. You were looking at the picture, the overall picture of the fic and how it works. Anyone can learn to be a beta, and you should. That is the point of this presentation. I'm hoping that maybe one or two people will walk into the server and decide to maybe take on that beta role, because posting is happening in, I'm going to say it, 15 days. We start posting in 15 days. So a lot of people are going to be editing right now, possibly looking for a beta. And so maybe some of you, think maybe it's something that you could offer. So maybe take that role. Taking the role doesn't mean you have a beta. Taking the role can just mean that you are... No. Oh my God, I wish my parents were the Game Grumps. That would be beautiful. Can you imagine Danny and Aaron Hansen as your parents? No, thanks. I've actually read his kisses tasted like spit. Yeah. Are you ready? Here's your prize. I got 2 pictures of every kitty and then a bonus of our porch stray called Lucky Dumps. No, I wasn't. No. Yeah, Curious is Curious is unique. She is unique and she is special. No, the stray is adorable, and he won't even let me pet him, but every now and then, like, if I put my hand out, he will, like, sniff my fingers and give me the tiniest of nose boops. It's very cute. Yeah, so Curious is an old lady. She was my husband's cat. We have integrated her into the household. And so she makes these faces because she's like a little bit cross-eyed and her face is really dumb. I posted that second picture on Tumblr and like half the comments are calling her either bald or like receding hairline cat. So like I can't unsee it now. It's very fair. Mama is just an absolute sweetheart. All right, she's tucked away in her trans rights bed. And then in the bottom one, she's actually sitting on top of my 2 work laptops. So she's helping. Yeah, Iggy, if any of the cats have a brain cell, it's either Mama or Iggy. Curious is the bald head. Oh my God. Oh, please. Oh my God. Yeah, so then the bottom one for Iggy is absolutely like what I woke up to after having a nap. And then it's this potato from the front and then potato from the side just to prove how fucking round that cat is. He's round. He's 22 pounds. He's giant. All right. So there you go. There you have it. And then I have included links to the resources that I used in helping to make this. A lot of them are really good. Tip of my tongue is helping you to find a word. And then Purdue Owl is like a really great place to look for grammar guidance. They look at the most popular and most accepted like academic grammar styles, okay, and the styles differ, so it's a place you can look to say, well, okay, maybe MLA doesn't do this, but does Chicago do this, right? Round cat, yes, he's 22 pounds. He's not like, he is fat, but he's also just big. Like if you just look at the length of his paws from front to back paws compared to Mama, he is like twice as long as Mama. So like some of that 22 pounds is legit just a big fucking cat. All right. Yeah. He is a giant cat. Anyway, I just want to go through these real quick. Phrases that people get wrong. This is the UK version that Nacho sent me. I'm sure there's an American version. Helping writers become authors, most common writing mistakes. This is a 52 entry series about like ways you can make your writing better. It's very interesting. Epithets, a lot of the guidance came from that page. There are a bunch of them. The AO3 comment of the day links to a document that's a beta reader checklist, which you can use to check off what you want your beta reader to look like and what you don't want your beta reader to look at. It's a very useful thing. And then on AO3, there's actually a multi-chapter guide to beta reading that looks at it as a beta and as a writer. So those are my some of the resources that I use that I thought would be the most helpful. But now we can go back to the fat cat. Yes, well, Curious tore the box up. She loved that box so much, she treated it like a cardboard claw and just shredded it everywhere. So the potato absolutely filled the box. Absolutely filled the box. Anyway, here we go. Any questions? Any thoughts? Any comments on some of the things we talked about, or on my cats? Yes, she looks so dumb. There's no brain cell in like even the vicinity. Okay, like taking that picture made me stupider. She's just insanely dumb. But anyway, if you have any advice on being a beta or while being nice, in case the thing that you say is something that somebody else does, I want to know what makes you back out of a fic. Yeah. Again, while being understanding, because if I'm like, I won't read blank, and somebody's like, oops, I do that. But yeah, everybody kind of has their own personal pet peeves, okay? If I see dialogue that I can't follow, I back out. I can't do it. Oh, no paragraph breaks. That's a bad one. First person POV, I will read in a book. But for some reason, fan fiction I struggle with it. I think you're right. No paragraph breaks sucks me. Insane. Anyway, Julie, I'm very glad it was helpful. I almost didn't get it finished in time because my work has been hell and my parents have been here. So I'm very glad that somebody likes this advice. I also find, and again, I know it's very popular with some people, but I find that it makes me cringe to read. Head hopping also, and when you've got writing that's like, bye. Telling and showing, like, it doesn't like make me nope out of a fic, but if every single paragraph is them telling me what this person is feeling and telling me this and telling me that and telling me this other thing, like, I just get bored. All right. And it doesn't mean your fic is like bad or grammatically wrong or whatever, but like, I just I lose interest. So I once wrote, a Clint and Bucky fic where they played the ABC game, which is where you pick a topic and you have to go through the alphabet and come up with that, and they played the ABC game with like inappropriate words for your dick. And I think I got all the way to W before I like couldn't figure. No, it wasn't W because W would have been weighing. U. I think it was U. I got to U, and I couldn't think of a good one for you, and so I had to pretend somebody called one of them so that they. But that's one. His hardness. You must call the king his hardness. That is a rule. These are all good. All right. Okay. This is actually been 2 hours. My parents' movie is over and I can hear them moving around in the kitchen. So I'm actually going to jump off the call, although I encourage, let's keep this conversation going because I think that there are friendly ways for us to talk about like, what makes you nope out of a fic. All right. Just, what are your personal no's? Because it doesn't mean that they're everybody else's no's. And maybe somebody really, really likes using the tall brunette. Okay. But like, to me, I hit that shit and I'm very weirded out. So anyway, I'm going to get off the mic, especially because nobody else is talking. Thank you guys all for coming. Please continue the conversation and I will make the slides available so that you can look at my stupid cats anytime you want. All right. Bye guys.